Have you ever noticed that most immigrants come to the United States bringing with them negative preconceptions about African Americans? Most African Americans have normalized this occurrence. I'm asking that you not normalize it, but instead critically think and ask yourself, why is this the case? Critically thinking and learning what is true is the only way that we will emancipate our minds from white mental slavery. We must function based upon what is true, and it begins with critically thinking. White governments don't want intelligent, critically thinking black populations. They only want black populations that are just smart enough to work, pay taxes, and fight within their wars, but that are dumb enough to call ourselves niggers because we've been made to foolishly believe that we've made it our own words and that using it now ridiculously empowers us. They also want black populations that are dumb enough to believe that a Bible written by our most ungodliest enemies and that was brutally beaten into the blood-soaked minds of our ancestors now ridiculously provides the path to our salvation. Black people, it's time to elevate our minds above all nonsense and open our eyes to our reality. We must learn the truth of our plight and condition, because if our understandings remains flawed, then all liberating remedies that stem from those flawed misunderstandings will also be flawed. This is why those who know must teach. African proverb. During the 80s, I personally witnessed many Cubans coming to the U.S. after floating on makeshift rafts, as well as subsequently many Asians and Arabs coming from extreme poverty and arriving in the U.S. looking down upon African Americans. This often includes many other black people from the Caribbean and Africa as well. Many African Americans have normalized this occurrence. However, rather than normalizing it, ask yourself, why is this the case? It's because of a deliberately deployed propaganda campaign that perpetually assassinates the character of African Americans by white oppressive forces. Character assassination is the malicious and unjustified harming of a targeted population's good reputation and discrediting them. It's being deployed against African Americans through a propaganda tactic known as manufactured consent to mistreat. Manufactured consent to mistreat is when those within positions of power want to create societal consent for the mistreatment of a targeted population. They use the media to portray the targeted population as being a major problem of the society through manufactured false news reports. What manufactured consent to mistreat specifically mean is to falsely turn a targeted population into a fearsome enemy of society through false, negative, vilifying news media propaganda. Then using the false negative depiction of the group to falsely justify the ongoing mistreatment of them, which include attacking them and even killing them. This is the warfare that white oppressive forces are presently deploying against African Americans. African Americans are being vilified, criminalized, and dehumanized in order to create contemptuous and incriminating beliefs about the African American population that are designed to make the nation and the entire world insensitive to the plight for African Americans. It tranquilizes efforts on our behalf, and it makes any serious criticism of the U.S. white racism almost impossible. Here's why it's being deployed against the African American population. The success of the 1960s civil rights movement was greatly due to the national and global support that was attained by Dr. King's nonviolent strategies. Once those images of African Americans being brutalized with fire hose, police batons, and canine dogs for merely peacefully seeking to be treated with a basic human dignity were aired on the ABC, on America's nightly news, they gained national and global support for the plight of African Americans. The global response and support of African Americans were immense. Dr. King was even awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his nonviolent efforts in pursuit for full equality for African Americans. African Americans were then favorably perceived by millions around the world as being a dignified people pursuing an equality that we should have been born with. These global response in support of African Americans totally embarrassed the U.S. government. It also eroded the U.S. government's global image and standing in the world. U.S. white oppressive forces realized then that to continue their subjugation of African Americans as a means of maintaining nationwide social dominance, it had become necessary to manufacture societal consent to do so. They achieved this by creating media propaganda that portrays African Americans as being a major problem of the society. The U.S. government has some of the best propagandists in the world. Through lies and manufactured news stories, African Americans are being made to look like we are a part of a treacherous, frightening, and almost insane fringe, thereby creating a false impression of wanton black criminality and violence. This creates prejudice, distorted perceptions, and incriminating beliefs about America's black population that are designed to make the nation and the entire world insensitive to our plight. Meeting this manufactured consent objective is the reason why, although the largest recipient in the U.S. of welfare recipients are in fact Caucasians, they falsely depicted as being African Americans. It's also why, although the largest benefactors of affirmative actions are in fact white women, and therefore by extension the white society, they falsely depict it as being African Americans. It's also, although why most violent crimes in the U.S. are committed by Caucasians, and although most cops are killed by Caucasians, they falsely depict these titles as belonging to being committed by African Americans. This character assassination of African Americans is very malicious. All too often, many African Americans subsequently began making negative remarks about our own group, thus engaging in a character assassination of ourselves. However, the ultimate objective is to create a shifting of victimization in behalf of the white society, which lessens pressure for social change in behalf of African Americans. When contempt of African Americans is made to appear justifiable, this creates conditioned response within the nation that allows eventualities to unfold against African Americans without opposition or resentment. This is very evident within the U.S. criminal justice system, wherein which African Americans are disproportionately incarcerated, given stiffer sentencings, and are more likely than any other racial groups to be treated brutally, beaten, and fired upon by police officers while being unarmed. This propaganda campaign is the reason why it is possible for white cops to routinely kill unarmed, innocent African Americans, even when the murders are captured on film, and still avoid being indicted by merely saying that they were in fear of losing their lives. Furthermore, this propaganda campaign creates a consensual national setting wherein which witnesses and bystanders and even world audiences now will sit by idle, allowing African Americans to be brutally mistreated under the belief that it's now justified. This propaganda campaign also allows the white society to use African Americans as its most ticketed and most fined groups that generates revenues throughout cities throughout the country, such as witnessed by the fact that the majority of people you would see in traffic courts are usually predominantly black, even when black drivers makes up only 30% of the city's drivers. African Americans are the constant revenue generators for the majority of cities across this nation and around the world. These injustices are now most often ignored because the perception has collectively become that is now justified. The media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent. Media has the power to influence minds, ideas, behaviors, and attitudes of the masses. That's a quote from Malcolm X. Here's the second reason why this propaganda campaign is being deployed against the African American population. During the 1960s, African Americans' unified protest against the U.S. system of white supremacy was unprecedented. It still remains unrivaled by any other group in U.S. history. African Americans had unknowingly proven themselves as being the greatest threat against the U.S. system of white supremacy. In a war, you must take down the biggest threat and the greatest adversary. You do so by tarnishing the strongest enemy's image and destroying their credibility. This prevents other groups from following them in any future revolts against you. You also do so by keeping the targeted group believing the fraudulent worst about themselves, to demoralize, divide, and make them self-loathing. This prevents them from unifying against their oppressors. It also attacks the core foundation of what bonds them as a people, and they can then be ruled over forever. This is also what's being done to Black people through the white society's negative depiction of us. We must wake up to our reality. We must elevate our minds above biblical fairy tales. There is an immense, given the history share between the Black population and the white population, there's an immense fear of massive Black retribution. The white side is also unrelenting in maintaining their position of social dominance. So to protect their social dominance and to prevent a massive Black revolt, the white society exploits its monopoly over information that's fed into the minds of Black people to manipulate the black population to think in ways that benefits the white society. Because the white society controls the media images of African Americans, they distort the image of African Americans in ways that aid the white society in its ongoing subjugation of Black people. And they keep our minds distracted and dumbed down by believing in idiotic things. But we must orientate our minds, elevate it to see our reality. I've heard Black people say things like, oh, we're cursed. Say things like, oh, it's Willie Lynch. As long as we keep our minds dumbed down, we will never liberate ourselves. A Black person who tries to liberate himself believing in nonsense is no different than a soldier going into a real war with a toy gun. Elevate our minds, learn the truth of our condition so then we can develop proper kind of strategies that are necessary to liberate ourselves. One love and peace.